I think we can start now. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final webinar of the REDEMOS project. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Spyridoula Markou. I work at Athens Technology Center as a fact-checking consultant and serve also as the communication manager of the REDEMOS project. I will be moderating today's discussion. So, firstly, let's talk about a little bit about REDEMOS. REDEMOS is a project that brings together 11 research-oriented and academic organizations from across Europe to address the fragile state of democracy in Eastern Europe and to explore ways forward for EU democracy support in the region. So, today's webinar titled Disinformation and Democratic Resilience in Ukraine, Lessons Learned from the EU's Eastern Neighbourhood, places Ukraine at the center of the discussion and draws broader lessons for the EU's Eastern Neighbourhood. So, drawing on insights from the REDEMOS project, we will explore how information manipulation affects trust, civic participation, and the role of civil society, as well as the implications for EU democracy support. So we are pleased today to welcome Siim Kumpas, who is the leader of the policy, strategy, and partnership team Info and Integrity and Countering FIMI division of the European External Action Service, and Mykola Balaban, who represents the Center for Strategic Communications of Ukraine. So thank you, both of you, for joining us. And I look forward, to having an engaging discussion. So I will start with Siim. So Siim, can you briefly introduce the European External Action Service and explain its role in addressing disinformation and FIMI?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Spyridoula, and for the kind introduction. Cutting right to the chase. So yeah, the European External Action Service is essentially the foreign ministry of the EU, or its closest equivalent that we have. And as so, we are mostly interested and tasked by European member states to look at everything outside of the EU, cooperation with non-EU countries, and in our specific case, countering foreign information manipulation and interference beyond the borders of the EU. So starting from our immediate neighborhood, of course, with a very close focus on the Eastern Partnership region and Ukraine, among others. That said, we are, the original organization behind the FIMI definition as such. And FIMI, for those who maybe have not heard about it before, is not just a fancy synonym to disinformation. It does include disinformation, but FIMI, again, foreign information manipulation and interference, it goes well beyond disinformation, looking at all possible ways, especially state actors and their proxies, in our case, mostly interested in Russia and China, how they use and manipulate the information space, using disinformation, but also using genuine information, amplifying it in a coordinated manner, but also how they use information suppression, how they use censorship, and so on. And our task is addressing all of that, making sense of it, monitoring it, analyzing it, and once we know what exactly the threat landscape looks like, then taking respective actions, both reactive and also proactive, trying to hit back at the very infrastructure that Russia, but also China, have set up for this manipulation, which I can talk about in more detail a little bit later on.
Thank you, Siim. Now, Mykola, disinformation is one of the main topics of the center that you are representing. Can you please describe your work on countering disinformation in Ukraine?
Thank you very much. Thank you for this kind introduction. I'm very happy to share Ukrainian knowledge and Ukrainian experience in this field. So our center was created back in 2021. It was the idea behind was to be, because we know that it's in order to countering like hybrid threats and information threats, it's very important the whole society approach. And in that philosophy, so the idea of the center to be the bridge between civil society and Ukrainian governmental organizations in countering the whole spectrum, let's put it like that, Russian information warfare against Ukraine. So what we are doing, so first of all, we monitor our Ukrainian information space, working very closely with Ukrainian CSOs and business, also like private sector. So we monitor, we prepare like some counter narratives. Also, we prepare debunking, pre-bunking, so the whole spectrum of different activities. But the main thing that we amplify, we help civil society to amplify their messages. At the same time, civil society amplify our messages. You know that in democratic society it's quite hard to in order to do any accusation of something, you need to have first of all crystal clear reputation, because it's especially in the field of information. And and basically what we are at the center CSC, so what we are doing, so we are basically the amplificator of civil society activities, and we produce also our own communication materials with that materials. So it's also go like both ways. So it's go to inform some elements to inform governmental institutions and to inform government, at the same time to present for broader society the findings and underline in this FIMI methodology that actually it is adversary that try to work with your opinion. It's not like through discussion on some topic.
Thank you, Mykola. Now, I would like to focus more on cooperation. So, Siim, the EEAS often uses the phrase united in response in the events that he organizes focused on disinformation. So, how important is this principle when countering disinformation, especially in cooperation with partners beyond the EU?
Yeah, well noted. I think we indeed have used that particular framing at least a couple of times. I mean, I would argue easily that partnerships in this space are crucial. Not nice to have, not good to have, but must have, because the FIMI threat we are facing, that Ukraine is facing, that so many of us in this space are facing, they are asymmetric in the sense of the spending. How much is our adversary or adversaries in plural? How much are they spending their money on this versus how much are we spending to better protect ourselves? We are being outspent. We are being outmaneuvered because we uphold certain ethical and professional standards, whereas and legal, obviously, whereas again the adversaries more often than not do not. So by definition, the threat we are facing is not an traditional equal threat. We can just match the response that would be on the same level as the attack itself. So this means we need to be smart, we need to partner, we need to collaborate, we need to find people in all sectors who share the same values and goals and work with them. And again, us being essentially the foreign ministry of the EU or the foreign service, partnering with countries beyond the EU is in our second nature. This is what our organization was set up to do, and this is what we do on a daily basis. For that, there are a number of different ways we work directly, bilaterally, with a range of governments who share similar goals as we do. This includes, of course, the government of Ukraine, but not only government, but the civil society and many of the private companies in Ukraine as well, but also in other countries, in Moldova, in some Western Balkans countries. It gets harder and harder the further we go, but we also have dedicated teams looking at Middle East and North Africa, looking at Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, and of course on top of that, in addition to these bilateral relationships that we have across the world, we are working together closely with our good friends over at NATO, but also G7 and other international fora. So once again, this is key, not just for us as a foreign service, but I think everybody in this space, given the asymmetric and borderless nature of the threat that we're facing.
Siim. So, Mykola, in your introductory remarks, you highlighted the importance of cooperation, how important has been to Ukraine's response to disinformation. So, your organization has both benefited from and also contributed to international efforts, including mapping Russian disinformation. So, why is cross-border cooperation so critical in this field?
Thank you very much. So it's super simple, because disinformation as a phenomenon, or information attack as a phenomenon, they don't have the border. So if, like, for example, this adversary player that won't change, some narrative about something, it's working on like couple like chessboards. So when we think, for example, that it's like this disinformation, the Russians, they are attack Ukraine, and it's everything like mostly around Ukraine. So we in Italy, for example, in Spain, for us it doesn't matter, but it's not like that. For example, like very simple narrative about this, like that the EU is the bad player. Or like EU is the worst thing that happens with Europe. I mean European Union. It's very clearly like Russian narrative, and it's working like internationally in different countries. So we see, like, for example, that like some information campaign started like in Ukraine and ended like around in Great Britain or something. That, of course, like the adversary is very smart, so they modulate, they change the narrative according to target audiences, according to different countries. But basically what they want to achieve, it's very similar for all countries. So that's why like there is like, so disinformation is cross-border phenomenon. And basically, in order to fight with this phenomenon, you need to collaborate and cooperate very, very close with different countries. And sometimes, for example, in case with Moldova, and there was an elections, and also like from Ukrainian side, we saw that a lot of like things like started in like some assets that Russians have. Let's put like in Ukrainian information space, like some Telegram channels that mostly working on Ukrainian target audience, and it's moved, when it's amplified, it's moved to Moldova and vice versa. So everything is connected in our world, especially like information, especially like narratives. So that's why the collaboration and any kind of countermeasures also it's crucial necessity for them to be also like cross-border and international, because like sometimes it's one thing, Another thing, like basically, it's also like cheaper. For example, if I know that something, it's if I see some disinformation about Greece in Ukrainian information space, for me, like to double check, to ask my colleagues from other country, guys, do you have this and that, and they immediately will give me back answer, instead of my team will like themselves like try to find, try to double check or fact check, etc., etc. So that's why it's very important to know each other, and basically, this network based approach to basically network based problem or threat, it's the best way to counter that phenomenon. Thank you.
So thank you, Mykola. Siim, Mykola described how narratives are spread across borders. So in the context of FIMI, how central are strategic narratives, and how does the EEAS approach them in practice?
Thanks. Yeah, they're not central, but this is not to say that they're not important. What I mean by that is, with the whole FIMI concept, the whole, or one of the main ideas we had when we pivoted from framing the problem as disinformation alone, to FIMI at large, was to move beyond narratives alone. Because when we started at the EEAS about 10 years ago, for the first 5-6 years, I would say, we almost exclusively focused on the narratives, on what was being said by our adversaries, analyzing their messaging, both official but also unofficial, and so on. But then we understood that this is really giving us only a part of the picture. So beyond that, we started using what is called the ABCDE framework. It's just one of the ways of describing what you see in the information space, and quickly running through it. A stands for the actor, so the who is behind a given information operation. B for the behavior, which is what we mostly focus on these days, the tactics, the techniques, the procedures, the how, not the what, but the how of manipulation. How are those messages created? Is it a human behind it? Is it a machine? How are they being? How are these websites being set up? How are the messages? How is the content being amplified, and so on? So the mechanics of manipulation. Then we also have the C for the content. So again, the what. So this is not to say that we don't look at narratives, but we find them in a way secondary to the behavioral aspect. And then the D for the degree, or how widespread is a given operation. Are we talking about a couple of posts on one platform, or are we talking about an elaborate multi-platform operation? And lastly, the E, or the effect, the impact that this is having on our targeted societies. And when I say narratives are secondary, it might sound counterintuitive from the kind of the targets or end users point of view, because narrative is sort of the visible part of any information operation. If me as an individual who's being targeted by an information operation, the only part of it I see is exactly the narrative, that the content that somebody's trying to peddle my way to make me think or behave differently. So from the target's point of view, narratives are absolutely key. But from the policy point of view, the reason why we have tried to pivot it beyond narratives, not away but beyond, is if we have a monitoring and analysis system that allows us to describe and kind of prove convincingly that something is an information operation without looking at what is being said, then we are at a much better position politically and operationally. Because if we only focus on what is being said, it is so easily being politicized and polarized these days. you can always throw out the freedom of expression card, because most of our constitutions protect speech to a very large degree, and that includes, with only a few limited exceptions, lying. So you can lie, and nobody can do anything about it unless it crosses the border of defamation or war propaganda or incitement to hatred. And that is why we have tried to set up a system where we can use different signals, different reference points, if you will, to show that something is an information operation. Now, if we can, add the narrative angle to it, that for us is a cherry on top of the cake, and also to have more color to what we do. We do keep track of narratives as well. So we have a sort of like a double track monitoring and analysis system, if you will, where on the one hand we are constantly developing this behavioral part of how we analyze information operations, and on the other hand we still continue monitoring narratives as well, especially via our flagship project EU versus Disinfo, where we on a daily and on a weekly basis uncover Russia's trending disinformation and FIMI cases in our database, but also our weekly newsletters, articles, and so on. So for us, it's about a balance. But if I had to choose between narratives and behavior, most of our focus these days, I would say, goes towards behavior for the reasons that I explained. Because again, it's more objective. It is less polarizing, and it is more respective of fundamental rights.
Thank you, Siim. Now, Mykola, I would like now to focus more on narratives in Ukraine. So I would like you to elaborate more on the FIMI narratives that have proven more resilient over time, and how have you seen this narrative spill over into other countries? I think you have also published a relevant report.
Thank you. Like when we're talking about narratives in Ukrainian case, and because we have a little other like specific or peculiarity than European than EU, so we have what we see that basically we have disinformation or like Russian narratives, Russian information operations. They are fully paralleled to their like actions on it's a part of war. So the idea of like Russians, so they want to disintegrate Ukrainian society, and there is like different like means to do that. So you have like physical attacks, warfare on the front line. You have the destruction of critical infrastructure. So basically, it's more about society and like resilience in the areas far away from the front line. And the third one, it's of course like for them it's a tool, information operations, that basically they want to so with the same topic, with the same idea, disintegrate Ukrainian society and basically win the war. In order for that, they use like how to say, the different rows of like narratives. And sometimes even when they see that, like Russians see that the narrative doesn't working, so they change the messages, but they still like push the same narratives. For example, one of the like longest lived and right now very like vivid narrative from Russia that they try to push through different messages is that we will win this war. Like Russians, we are never like so you can as much as possible, you can resist, you can kill as many as you want, like Russian soldiers, there will be more, and we just like we are like unstoppable machine, we are moving forward. which is like very similar, like I think for Europeans, when you see or look for example, some news about like when like Mr. Trump, President Trump, talking about it in his discussions, there is also like this that Russia, they are so big, they are big empire, they will win in anything. So and this narrative, it's working both on Ukrainian society, but also at the same time internationally, because when you are looking on your news and like news feeds and just listening to the discussions, there is also like a lot of even how to say, like legit researchers who stay to have a doubt, like maybe like Ukrainians, they are much weaker than they were a year before. But okay, there is like legitimate discussion, but it's the same time like Russians work with this topic very hard, and they throw a lot of resources to that like it doesn't matter what you are doing, at the end, maybe in a year or in 10 years, we will prevail. So that's why your resistance right now doesn't make sense, because right now you have A, B, C, D problems. Just stop resisting and everything will be okay. So it's like this inevitability, and it's like this narrative, because like for Ukrainians, like they don't have too much possibilities to like go this narrative, work with this narrative with messages frontline, like on the Ukrainian population. So they use a lot of like different messages, but basically that support that narrative. It's like one thing. Another thing is like internal, like also like this to amplify the narrative about like this internal Ukrainian struggle. So they destroying some part of Ukrainian critical infrastructure is mean electricity rationing. Electricity rationing is mean the one city have the electricity from for some time, and another city is like completely in blackout. And they are working very actively to show that basically look, Ukrainians, your government does not like work for you, does not help your everyday needs. They are like prefer to support more this city against that city, and it's constantly working. So this like to build up this struggles within like Ukrainian regions, etc. Also, there is but it's actually everything is working for the same cause. So the idea behind Ukrainian society should become like weaker and less resistant to our like political goals, to our attack, to our warfare. And of course, like they do with this narrative, they try to sell it in European countries. They sell it like through a little bit with other messaging, but also I think you heard about that, like Ukrainian government is fully corrupt. They all support that gives it's and it's like through different messengers. It's sometimes not sometimes, but we see that. So it's right now, for example, for the last couple months, those like two main narratives that working like very strongly. Another narrative that Russians try to impose internally in Ukraine, but also externally for you, and I think it's very visible to Europeans especially, that actually we want peace. Russians like we want to go to we want to have a peace, but it's like bad Zelensky, bad Ukrainian military, bad Europeans that want to fight, that want war. So, and it's also like, so these narratives, they cut it to a lot of different messages for different countries, also including Ukraine, and they like push these narratives and yeah, also to how to say, to destroy the like this general pact of European support to Ukrainian cause. So it's yeah, and it's of course that there was like, since full scale invasion started, there was like couple times that there was a mutation of those narratives, but generally they stay the same.
Thank you, Mykola. Siim, it has been proven that disinformation undermines trust and civic participation, and also Mykola and before, touched upon the trust issue. This is something that also it is highlighted in the EEAS threat report, the annual threat report. Also, do current EU democracy support tools in the eastern neighborhood adequately, address this challenge?
I think the focus is there. The ideas are there, but I think we do need to scale it up, realistically speaking, especially in the light of other donors such as the US, stripping away their support, especially financial support, but also moral support to that sort of work in the Eastern Partnership neighborhood and Ukraine specifically. So there is, let's be honest here, there is a gap, and the EU has not been able to and will not be able to fill all of that gap, unfortunately, because it's just too big and it came too abruptly. But that said, the EU is working hard to make sure that we can, pick up some of the bills that are now being left unpaid by our other partners. So that work is being done. There is the new Democracy Shield that was announced recently. There's a new European Center for Democratic Resilience that is being built under the Shield, and that center will, once set up, once operational, have a role for non-EU member states as well. So that's baked into the whole idea of the center, that it would bring together not only EU member states, for whom we already have, for example, the rapid alert system run by the EEAS that does bring all the member states together. But the idea of the center is to allow for others, both non-member state governments, but also hopefully civil society partners, to come together in a safe space to, on the one hand, exchange the threat information and threat landscape, but also to then, in desired settings, discuss what can be done to address those issues. So I think the ideas are there. There's movement in a good direction, and for years the EU has done a lot, but we and I don't think anybody could see that sort of an abrupt stop to funding to the region's partners. So that is something we need to find a way around, and that is something we discuss with our other partners via the G7. For example, the G7 has something called the Rapid Response Mechanism, bringing together all the G7 partners, but also some associate members such as Sweden, Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, NATO. With them, we are trying to, again, one of the things we discuss in our meetings is how can we better not only deconflict our support to the Eastern Partnership region, for example, but also how can we, practically work together with the partners on the ground in a way that makes most sense to those civil society organizations in the region.
Mykola, my next question will be again, about public trust, but I would like, to examine it from another angle. So, we know that despite, sustained disinformation pressure, civic participation in Ukraine remains high. So, what factors, have been most important in maintaining this public trust, and what lessons could be relevant for other Eastern neighborhood countries?
Thank you. The main issue I think here is basically that Russians, with attacking on Ukraine with this full-scale operation, so without masks, without any this hybrid approach, so they attack, and Ukrainian society concentrate around, the one goal that we need to survive. In order to survive, we need to be active. Everyone needs to do something. So it's, I think that and it is at the core of like the civilian participations. Like, for example, why we protest against, some unfair law, even right now, even in this situation, because we know that like it's make us stronger, not like weaker. Why we need to be stronger? Because we need to survive, from that attack, from that aggression. So from one perspective, and it is at the core. And I think it's almost impossible, to copy somewhere else. Like you need because there is Ukraine in this extremely drastical circumstances of like fighting for surviving, like that. It's not like relevant for other Euro countries in Europe, for example. So it's quite hard to achieve like something similar. It's one thing. Another thing is that society, because Ukraine have this Crimea, Ukrainian society have in 2014 after Euromaidan, there was this Crimea, and everything around when Russia, like with this hybrid attack, they took Crimea, and this 6 years between full scale and they take Crimea, it was like a Ukrainian society. There was a lot of discussion, and Ukrainian society basically built up, the immunity for a lot of from a lot of attacks, from Russian side. So it's like, when you have you catch a flu, of course you are like have like 20 days, with feeling very bad. But after that you have like some immunity for that flu. So it's very similar, with because like in 2014 I recall like in my experience, I was like absolutely not ready, to this new type of manipulating, like this political manipulation, communicational manipulation, information manipulation, and it is. And since 2014, Ukrainian society work a lot and build up a lot. The civil society build up a lot of institutions, organizations, mechanisms, how to make this public engagement and to stay like active. If you are democratic society, and it's mean a lot of like it's much harder for democratic society to resist information pressure from abroad. So so basically it's because of that. And what I think what is like very important, what could be what I can share as a lessons learned that could be working with in European countries, is to build up networks as much like these trusted networks as much as possible. And because when something it's happened, you can build up as much as possible, some smart, anti-narrative explanations and here and there, but there will be like the adversary will create something else, like something additional. It's like in warfare. But if you build up this trusted network, if you have like in place people that trust each other, that can amplify quickly, that can share, that don't like have how to say this feeling that maybe you are like my adversary in politics, I'm not voting for this party, I'm for this party. It's not about, but to build up this network, it's 50% of success in like building this democratic resilience against foreign information activities.
So Mykola, he also, in his last phrase mentioned about building resilience, democratic resilience. So the next questions will focus on this topic. So Siim, the EEAS donut framework has, building resilience as a core pillar against FIMI. So which resilience component do you consider most critical today for the Eastern neighborhood?
Thanks. Yeah, I love it how the nickname Donut has become wider spread in the community. Yeah, I mean, as you rightly said, resilience building is one of the key pillars that we focus on. The logic there being that, facing Russia and China, we cannot make them stop, because using information as a weapon is a must-have for them. Their systems are built up on lies and manipulation at home, and this reflects to how they conduct their business abroad as well. So we can throw all the sanctions at them. We can, invest hundreds of millions, but they will never stop as long as the current regimes are in power. So the key thing we can focus on, there are a couple of things, but one of the key pillars there exactly is making sure that our own defenses are as good as possible. So that's why we talk that much about resilience building. And there, at least for me, it does sound maybe a bit elementary, and I don't think that is something that is necessarily needed in Ukraine. But if we talk about the broader Eastern Partnership region, for me at least, it all begins with threat level awareness. We want to make sure that people across the society, everybody from the highest decision makers to people on the ground, have a realistic perception of the threats. Not too low, because if it's too low, then people just are not motivated to take any action. If you're a decision maker, you will not allocate any funding, you will not set up dedicated teams to address the problem. But also, if you're just an ordinary citizen minding your own business, you will not take up any media literacy advice, for example, from the government, or from your public broadcasting, or from civil society organizations. So you need to perceive the threat in a realistic way, but we don't want the threat to be too high either, because then people can easily fall into a sort of a moral panic and overthink the threat, and essentially pave way for the uncertainty that the adversary is trying to exactly achieve with their own manipulative actions. So it's a fine balance of keeping people informed, but not kind of throwing them over the cliff into this moral abyss where they feel hopeless and feel that they cannot change anything. So this is really the key. And for that to happen, you need to be, as a government, for example, what I very much like about the Estonian government, being from Estonia, and having worked for the respective system some years ago, is how Estonia's security services started from very early on. From I think, if I'm not mistaken, our internal security service started publishing public annual reports back in late 90s. So they've been doing this for more than 25 years now, very openly, or as openly as possible for an organization such as theirs, to speak about what they see, essentially, giving you the highlights of last year, talking about the major cases, the spies they've uncovered, and so on. So this is, by now you have a number of other intelligence services who do the same, but Estonia was one of the first ones to start doing that back in the day. So these types of transparency enhancing steps by governments are absolutely crucial, because only then can you make sure that the kind of the foundation is there, that investigative journalists, that civil society organizations, fact checkers, and others can build on, because you don't necessarily have to take at face value what the government says, but the government needs to put out sufficiently transparent information for other parts of the society to do their job. And it all starts from there, building from that. This takes us to the education system, to integrating information and media literacy as a core subject to our curriculum, which is easier in smaller states where you have a centralized curriculum like in Estonia and the Nordic countries, for example. Much more difficult in federal systems where every state has their own curriculum. But this is something that I believe is crucial once you have that threat level perception in place. Thanks.
Thank you, Siim. Now, I would like to deep dive on Ukraine's experience. So, Mykola, what has been most effective in strengthening, societal resilience to disinformation, and how transferable are these practices to other countries that face, similar spillover from Russian narratives?
I think in my previous answers, I already make some spoilers on that. So my main, from Ukrainian perspective and what we observe in Ukrainian is, as I said previously, that like this experience of 2014, and basically after 2014 and all this shock that Ukrainian society saw, like it's raised up a lot of since then a lot of very good smart initiative that can be that basically was pillars of resilience against the Russian information activities, information operations. It's one thing, and another what could be shared and used in other countries, basically this what we in Ukraine call beehive communication. Basically, if you build up the network, like the trusted network, if something, so I can like add here, like Siim start very good with this concept that like should be awareness. If you have the network and you have some amount of awareness in society that it's could start it, for example, tomorrow or like in couple days. So it is the best way to, when something starts, there is an awareness and there is like the people, the organizations in place that can amplify, some information, the credible information. It could be how to say it was the effect that managed that Ukraine managed to preserve our information bubble, without like the disruption or the destruction of that bubble. Because in 2014, for example, also, to make a comparison, it was not like that Russians managed to go inside this legitimate Ukrainian discussions, but this Ukrainian information bubble, and basically disrupt it and use it in that order that they find useful for their cause. So yeah, that's why working together, beehive communication, build up networks, build up trust. It's everything. It's add like piece by piece. There is no like silver bullet or like silver activities against this kind of phenomenon. And unfortunately, this phenomenon will stay. I mean, disinformation, information operations will stay according to my feelings or my observation, will stay with us, with democratic societies through the whole 21st century. So I'm very happy for European unions and basically that the European Union build up like new institutions, try new approach, and to in building this resilience, because it's exactly what all of us what we need to do. And another important way, this what's also like working this whole society approach to countering any type of threat, information threats. It's also like to build up the institutions that could be not necessary, maybe like the central government, but like some semi-governmental institutions that could be like be as a bridge between the government and society. It's also could be helpful.
Thank you, Mykola. Now I will open the floor to the attendees. We have already received 4 questions. So I will start with the first one, which is posed by Tatiana. So I think this question is for you, Siim. So last week, Kaja Kallas announced that Armenia requested assistance to counter hybrid threats ahead of the 2026, similar to what was provided to Moldova. Could you speak about challenges in Armenia and plans to mitigate them?
Sure. Yes, we are very much focused on Armenia, among others. I mean, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm after the overall positive result in Moldova. I think we still should, it's not enough to really rest at laurels after the positive result in Moldova. I think we can attribute we as the broader kind of defender community, as I like to call the community, we can attribute some of that success to our good work, but there were other factors at play. We can also see this as a Russian failure, and we can already see that in Moldova's case they are regrouping, and they will come back because there are local elections in Moldova next year, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Or 27, either or, and we can definitely expect Russians to return full of more determination to skew the results once again. Now in Armenia, of course, it's a very different context. This is what makes the Eastern Partnership region very, very dynamic, is that we call it a region, but if we look at all the 6 countries in the region, they are so vastly different that it's really it at times feels artificial to even refer to it as a single region, because all the countries, even if geographically close to one another, they face so different political challenges. And in the case of Armenia, of course, they are very much concerned with their neighbor in the west, Azerbaijan, and I mean their political system has historically been quite amicable to the Russian government. This is not the case at the moment, but still, if you speak with people on the ground, they definitely perceive the threats coming from Azerbaijan way higher than the threats coming from Russia, and that makes sense because they've recently been in an active war with Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has annexed part of their territory and so on. So it individually speaking, it is totally understandable how they first and foremost focus on that threat and not the threat posed by Russia, even if the threat posed by Russia is arguably greater and more strategic and more long-term. So I think I was just recently in my previous response speaking about threat level awareness. I think in the case of Armenia, that is exactly where we need to focus our efforts on, is that threat level awareness, making sure that people, it's not to take away from the threats that they perceive coming from the West, from their point of view, or from the East, sorry, from Azerbaijan, but it is to make sure that they realistically understand and assess threats posed by Russia as well. So this is something we will be definitely be focusing on. There is a lot of work to be done because, unlike in Moldova, where there is now a dedicated organization, the Strategic Communication Center responsible for that sort of work, we don't necessarily have a as clear counterpart in Armenia. So again, there is a lot of work to be done there. We have started to work already some time ago, but much more remains to be done ahead of next year's elections.
So, Siim, the next question is also for you. It is coming from Stamos, who works as a fact checker here in Greece. And his question is, after all the investment in analyzing disinfo narratives and trying to counter them, either with campaigns, fact-checking, or even more direct approaches like taking down coordinated networks, do you see quantifiable evidence that these operations have been effective? So meaning reduction in operational activity or weakening in the volume or sophistication of coordinated campaigns? In essence, do you see evidence that our approaches are efficient enough to make a dent?
The answer to that depends how I'm feeling the given day, I would say. If I'm feeling more optimistic, I have a more positive response there. Some days I have a more pessimistic response. I very much agree with Mykola in the sense that, disinformation is there to stay. I mean, disinformation in general, in every shape and size, but especially when coming from Russia, because as I explained earlier, I mean, for them, using information as a weapon is crucial. They will using this until this regime is in power. This will never change. So again, we can never. The realistic ambition in this this fight is not to make them stop, because this will. We could set this as an aim, but we would never achieve it because that is not realistic. They will just not do that. So I think the aim we have more realistically, and also we cannot really. I'm not sure we can, diminish the volume of disinformation or information manipulation they put out, especially in light of AI-powered tools. You can create literally endless amounts of disinformation. Now, looking at it from a more optimistic point of view, even if the adversary pumps up the volume, the scale of the manipulative content they put out, this does not increase the number of consumers. So they still have to compete with that attention of people who are, already stuck at their screens. There are so many advertisers who compete for the same attention. There are game developers who compete for that same attention. So I'm not sure we should necessarily be too consumed over the quantity of disinformation, because most of that never reaches anybody. Most of that is not consumed by people. So that's I think something to bear in mind. We cannot just look at the volume of content out there. We need to also look at how much of that ever reaches any eyeballs, and the answer is very little, and most of it reaches only a handful of people. A lot of it is consumed and amplified by other bots. So it's it's essentially living in its own little bubble, not reaching a lot of people. When it comes to us making a dent in their infrastructure, it is really difficult to measure, but I do believe that we are starting to make a difference. I think, going against their infrastructure as such, as an approach, is relatively new still. We have only been trying to do that for the past a couple of years maximum. Before that, everybody had their eyes on addressing manipulative narratives, on fact-checking, debunking, which I wouldn't count as ineffective. I think fact-checking very much has a place in this space, but in terms of having an actual effect, it really is about shaking that infrastructure. And there, looking ahead, I think there is untapped potential in us cooperating, us as the defender community, again, not just the EEAS, but more broadly, cooperating, for example, with the law enforcement, because some of the activities are illegal. So there are ways to, if a sanctioned entity is using some proxies to pay for their service providers, etc., that is illegal. So we can take law enforcement measures against some parts of those operations. we can also make sure that we have good dialogues with service providers, with not just social media platforms, but internet service providers, domain providers, and others. So these are the kinds of, just to give you some flavor of what we're thinking about in Brussels, these are some of the things we are trying to pursue to just make sure that the infrastructure that is oftentimes developed in democratic countries by capitalistic companies is not being misused or abused by Russia and others.
So, Mykola, I know that this question was addressed to Siim, but I would like to hear your opinion on this. Do you believe that the approaches that we use in order to counter disinformation are efficient enough to make a dent?
It's very hard, complicated question. In Ukraine, when we discuss about that, of course, like a lot of voices said the best way is that like if you are in defensive, it's always like how to say, you need also to play offensively. So for example, like we try to do this and we try to do that, and what is the how to say where is the outcomes, and the outcomes is not how to say, we think it's too small. So but it's right now what we think about when I'm thinking about this topic and this type of questions. I think it's like Ukraine, Russians send a lot of rockets to Ukraine and to destroy Ukrainian infrastructures and homes and buildings. And it's like they countering disinformation. What we are doing all together, it's very similar to anti-rocket defense or like anti-air defense. Of course, a lot of rockets manage, to land it up, but it's always about like this difference. Sometimes like it's invisible that basically anti-rockets. These missiles destroy this or that amount of rockets, but at the end of the day, it's how to say, the people like in Ukraine, when you will ask the average Ukrainian what is best to do, to pay more money for building up like attack rockets or to build up the anti-air defense, and definitely they will say, because it's their homes, it's their like, so it's like anti-air defense. So here is like, I think, a little bit similar situation. I think then that since 2021, a lot also like from European side, the politics that EEAS how to say developed against countering disinformation. Right now, it's like more defined as FIMI, which is very good. So there is like, and as in any process, there is a development. Of course, there is some. It could be the criticism, but it's. But it's the way of like false and rights moves, and I think at the end of the day it's more like this right moves much more than maybe not right. So yeah.
Thank you, Mykola. Now there are two more questions. Both are addressed to Mykola, so I will try to merge them so we can, give us one answer. The first one comes from Madalena, and her focus is on civil society as an important actor to be supported. So her question is, do the EU and Ukraine have a strategy and instruments to reach those societal actors and assist in the war against disinformation? And the second one from Tatiana, focus on social media and micro-targeting communities in Ukraine. So, and her question is, given the attacks on critical infrastructure in Odessa in recent weeks, have you seen any information activities related to those or intensified territorial claims?
Thank you. It's big questions. So in terms of like how Ukrainian like government support or help like civil society is how to say, it's always like when you want somehow to support civil society, it's always about resources. So it's about the money that can like be shared for different types of activities. It's in Ukraine in the situation of war, so almost all our resources is going for physical defense. But I think a couple months ago we launched the special program, so like civil CSOs can apply for grants in different topics, but also among other topics is to build up some communication materials about countering disinformation. So if the question was about that. The second questions in like micro targeting is the right now when we're talking. So mostly all our conversation today, or what I've shared with you, it was about narratives and counter narratives and like big things. When we're talking about like methodology, Russians in like about like methodology, so how they push their messages. So it was drastic change since 2021. So right now we are for last year and a half, what we called in Ukraine, we are in the era of micro targeting because Russians don't have these big guns. They don't have the possibility to go to like some like Ukrainian big news channels or large newspapers, electronic newspapers, online papers, etc., etc. So they are working very actively with micro targeting, with community, with communities, with all the time changing a little bit the target audiences. So they are very active, and especially when we're talking about like regional, I start a little bit like couple of questions before I start talking a little about that, but like they are working very actively to how to say to share these divisions that different regions suffer different situations in Ukraine, and everything is because of Ukrainian government do not do this or that, etc., etc. When we're talking about last attacks on Odessa, first part of my answer that it's always because for Russians, information layer of information warfare, it's only one of the layer of like physical, of like this political, physical warfare. So when they attacked Odessa, they immediately like there was a package prepared with narratives for Odessa regions, for those people, for generally like Ukrainian publics, and also with this micro targeting. And mostly when we're talking about like micro targeting, it's mean that you need is that because they are working through like some small Telegram channels. It could be like some Telegram channels of one particular neighborhood in Odessa city or something like that. Neighborhoods channels, etc., etc. So they should be like the messages should be like some super small. So there is no electricity here, but the government sell electricity to Moldova, or there is like you look like because of like Odessa, it's not top priority region in Ukraine, so there was a less anti-air like missiles in Odessa. So when there was a Russians attack, there was a big devastations there, or about like cutting. So it's definitely like in case of Ukraine, information operations always it's only the layer of like physical operation. It's quite hard to explain, for international audience because you don't have this. But it's also very similar when there is something happens, some tragedy happens in Germany. Immediately there is like some additional layers of information activities from adversary side. So, short answer: yes. this micro-targeting is like working very actively, and basically, yeah, we try to inform from our side, the center side, we try to inform our like political stakeholders and regional administration to produce the reliable communication material, because first of all there is a lot of physical damage and physical physical problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mykola. So, to conclude, today's webinar aimed to bring together the EU perspective with insight from the field, placing Ukraine at the center of this discussion. So, I think through concrete examples from Ukraine, such as the coordinated strategic communication, rapid debunking of disinformation narratives, and also the close cooperation between the state and the institutions and the civil society. We saw how democratic resilience can be strengthened in practice, even under conditions of constant information pressure. So I believe this experience offers important lessons, not only for Ukraine, but also for the EU's Eastern neighborhood more broadly, particularly when it comes to supporting trust, civic engagement, and resilience against information manipulation. I would like to sincerely thank our speakers, Siim and Mykola, that share their experience, and thank all of you for joining us in this final REDEMOS webinar. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks much. Bye-bye.